I'm John Hosea, retired United States Army Staff Sergeant. I did 12 years in the Airborne Infantry, 5 combat tours to Iraq and Afghanistan. I want to introduce to you my family, my support, my protection, the ones that get me through a normal day. My beautiful wife, Sarah, of almost 20 years. Who tried her hardest not to be up on stage with me. My oldest daughter, Casey, who's 19, is a freshman at CSN, who actually is studying to become a physical therapist so she can help wounded veterans. Mackenzie, who is 17, is a senior at Arborview, who is currently, after she graduates, going to go become a vet tech so she can work with service dogs and animals. And as you all saw, beautiful Madison in the picture, who's 12, who's a 7th grader at Lead Middle School. And last but certainly not least, most of you already know Tyler, our flower that grew amongst the rubble, who I'm sure periodically will be running throughout the building. Yesterday when I was practicing, she was laying on the stage up here on my leg, running around, and she's quite the distraction. To give my testimony, I got to take you almost back to the beginning of my military career and bring it back full circle so you understand. It's more of a roller coaster ride of extreme highs, extreme lows, and some very dark times. But with that, some very good times. But to tell you that too, I must also give you a heads up. Periodically through the day, little ninjas might pop out underneath your seat and start cutting onions. If this happens, there's tissues in the back or along the aisles. If you see one up here, please throw something at him and knock him out before. Let me start off by telling you a story to bring things in perspective for you. During Hurricane Katrina, there was an old man who for a couple of days prior was told to leave the area, and he kept saying, "Nope, God will protect me." The old man stayed in his house. As the flood water started to rise, the sheriff came to him and said, "Hey, you got to go." "Nope, God will protect me." And he said, "I'm staying." A few hours later, the water had risen so high that it was at his roof now, and he had to evacuate to his roof. A boat came and said, "Sir, you've got to leave." "Nope, I'm staying. God will protect me." So the boat left. A little bit of time later, the water had risen so high he was now waist deep in water. Coast Guard helicopter flew by, saw him, dropped a diver in and said, "Hey, you got to go. Come with us." "Nope, I'm staying." As you can imagine, a short time later, the old man drowned. When he got to heaven, he walked and got to God and said, "Why didn't you protect me?" God said, "I sent TV messages, I sent a policeman, I sent a helicopter, and I sent a boat. What more do you want me to do?" Like the old man, I didn't know when God put people in my life. I turned them away and didn't realize that God was trying to save my soul. James 1:5 tells us, "If any of you lacks wisdom, he asks God, who gives generosity to all, without finding fault, and it will be given to him." To a certain point in my life, until I got injured, I knew I believed in God. I knew he was there, but I didn't know because of what I was doing if I'd get a place up in heaven. First person I'm going to talk to you about today was my airborne school chaplain. No matter how rude I was, no matter how uninterested I was, no matter how I blew him off, grabbed the anchor line cable and kicked him out the aircraft with both feet, he continued to preach to me, and he continued to come at me in different ways. To the point of, I had to suck my pride up and go to him and say, "Hey, my marriage is failing. I need help." So he counseled Sarah and I for weeks, taught us how to communicate again, and taught us how to find our love language, which unfortunately at the time, our love languages were two different things. Neil still today checks on me periodically. Facebook message, an instant message, it doesn't matter. I know he's always there for me to talk to and pick up the phone and call. The next person, when that didn't work, the Lord said, all right, one person doesn't work, I'm going to send two at you. At the same time. The next pair I'm going to talk about is Major Ed Oswald and Command Sergeant Major retired Todd Spenson. I had left airborne school and was on the trail, which put even more strain on my marriage because I was gone from 3 o'clock in the morning till, 10 or 11 o'clock at night? For 3 years. Ed's approach was a lot different than Neil's approach. He would send me emails in the middle of the day with scripture, call me for a meeting to his office, where it was more of him trying to pound the Lord into me. Literally, pound the Lord into me. To the point of he invited the family and I to Easter at his church, which was a life-changing experience. And as I started to write my testimony, stuff that I hadn't thought about in years and that I had forgotten all started to come back to me. Even stuff about the day that we hit the IED, it all started coming back to me. Some of the traditions that we had with Ed's family that day, we still celebrate today with our family. Todd's approach was a little different. He moved me up so he could keep a closer eye on me to the battalion level to make him his operations in COIC, which meant he could really keep an eye on me because I was constantly in his office with different things. But with that, I watched my mentor go through probably the toughest thing in his life. His daughter had been diagnosed with a rare form of cancer in her brain. But like most, he didn't turn it off. He fell to his knees and he prayed to God constantly. And I watched him go from one of the toughest people I'd ever known, hit like a brick truck, who was stern when he had to be, turn his entire life and focus on God and his family and his daughter. Tori, I'm proud to say today, is cancer-free. You'll hear a little more about Tori as we go through today. Tori was kind of my inspiration to get on my feet. We'll get to that. It's down the line a little bit. Having both Ed and Todd walking with me through the Lord was a huge impact. Unfortunately, like the old man, I didn't see it. It took multiple events to happen for me to finally see it. And you're probably going, well, why do you feel like that? He had all these people coming at him. It's pretty simple in my eyes. In the Bible, it says, thou shalt not kill. It doesn't say thou shalt pick up a radio and drop a bomb on somebody. Thou shalt shoot somebody from 1,000 meters. It says thou shalt not kill. It doesn't care how you do it. It just says thou shalt not kill. It didn't matter how many people would come at me and said, oh, no, it's okay. In my head, and we all know the devil comes at us in different ways. To me, he got into my head and twisted things around. So to me, it didn't matter what I did. Didn't matter anything. In my head, I had it convinced, no matter what I had done, that unfortunately I was going downstairs. Even if I did live a good life, which I tried to do, it was in my head. 2005 rolled around. I was so much in my head at this point before I deployed to Iraq that I turned to alcohol in an extreme way, to the point of I had pushed my family away. We were living in Germany at the time. I sent them back to the States so I could be alone. On a normal night, I'd polish off a bottle of Jack Daniels and about 5 beers, and then get up the next morning and run 5 miles. So I was in shape. I was a drunk, but I was in shape. After a mission, I came back. I looked in the mirror and went, what am I doing with my life? I got to fix my marriage. And that's when I took the assignments at Fort Benning and became an airborne instructor. So while I was at Fort Benning, and Todd and all that was going on, and Ed were coming at me, the Army said, hey, you've been at Fort Benning long enough. It's time you go back into the fight. And I was like, oh, thank you, Lord. I couldn't take being in TRADOC anymore. Teaching people was great, but I needed to get back to the fight. So the Lord gave me an assignment. He said, you can pick. You have two choices. You can go to Alaska, which having 3 daughters, thinking of them sitting on the beach all the time, really didn't sound appealing to me. Or you can go to Alaska, where they'll have to wear turtlenecks, snowsuits, and no one will see what they have. And I was like, I like that. So I made the decision for us to go to Alaska. I'm getting to that part. Something went through our head. What that was, I have no idea. But we decided to load up our Ford F-150 pickup truck, towing the boat, all 3 girls in the back seat, Sarah and I in the front seat, and drive from Columbus, Georgia to Anchorage, Alaska. No, we left the dog at your house. Yes. 2.5 weeks it took us to get there, stopping and seeing multiple family along the way. It took us 2.5 days to get through Canada. The first night we camped in Canada and it rained on us the entire time. So we said, we'll stop at a hotel the next night and stay. Needless to say, we drove 18 hours the next day to make it into Alaska. In Canada, they don't believe in door locks. In a town that was full of bears, they had little round hoops that they put on the doors to stop the bears. And as most of you know, Canada has very strict gun laws. I had a shotgun, but no ammo because they searched the truck and took the ammo as we crossed in. So when we got to Anchorage, Sarah immediately went back to her faith. She started going to church. At this time, I was a 4-time-a-year kind of Christian. You know, Christmas, Easter, one other holiday in there, maybe Palm Sunday or something, and then Mother's Day, because happy wife, happy life. And Sarah completely devoted herself into what she was doing. I, on the other hand, knew that within 90 days of us getting to Alaska that I'd be on the next thing smoking to Afghanistan, which was fine. I was fine with that. We packed up all of our gear. This deployment, unlike any other deployment I had, was extremely busy from the time I got there to the time we got injured. We were doing 1 to 2 patrols a day, plus somebody would throw in a 3 to 4 day mission in there. In the beginning of April, I finally got to take my R&R and return home to my family. But unlike any R&R I had taken in the past, this one felt really different. And it was a complete test the entire time I was there with the Lord. At the time, I didn't know it, but it was making me draw my family closer to me, and I didn't understand why. In the back of my head, I knew there was something in the air that just didn't feel right. So after 2 weeks of leave, Sarah begging me to stay and not to go back, I got on the plane and headed back. I got laid over in Atlanta where my parents came down to see. And like Sarah, my mom and dad begged me not to go back. Everybody seemed to know something was going to happen, but none of us knew what it was. So getting back to Afghanistan, I jumped on a convoy, headed back to my boys. The morning that I left Salerno, it was attacked. 4 U.S. service members were killed and several wounded. I had dodged a huge bullet considering that all of my gear was back at my fire base and I would have been unarmed. So again, the Lord was still protecting me. I'd been back about 3 or 4 weeks and 9 June rolled around. This was the day that would change my life, Nick's life, and Tyler's life forever. That morning started out like any other mission, except for the feeling that I had in my gut. And I couldn't shake it. So I got everyone up and said, hey, I want you guys to all add extra ammo to the trucks. And my guys will all attest that I always had a speedball ready to go should something ever happen, because you've never been in a firefight and ran out of ammo before. So to make sure that my boys were safe, we added about 1,500 extra rounds to each truck, and I had the guys add some extra things that went boom just to be on the safe side. For the first time in hundreds and hundreds of missions that I'd been on, I had never done this one thing before. But something told me I needed to hear Sarah's voice. So I grabbed chow with the boys real quick, told them what time they needed to be in the op order, and I went to MWR to make a phone call. This is how you know you've been married a long time, when you know your wife's menstrual cycle. So we had been joking on the phone, and I said, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? She's like, oh, I'm taking the kids to a water park. I'm like, water park? Isn't it that time of the month? Which started us down a new conversation. So any of you young people thinking of joining the military, let me give you some advice. 2 things that don't go together is the United States Air Force and a vasectomy. 5 years prior, when we were still stationed in Germany, I let the Air Force give a vasectomy on me. You all see Tyler running around the back room. After joking like a couple of kids, I told her I loved her, I had some things I had to do, and I'd call her when I got done. I hung up the phone, headed into the operations center, sat down with our intel officer and our company commander, and went over the plan one more time, trying to convince my platoon leader and the company commander that we needed to move the mission from a ground assault to an air assault. Unfortunately, those in the battalion decided that I was wrong and we were going in by ground, no matter what, that we had to stay, that our assets on the ground said we had to be there by a certain time. From this point, several events started to take place that should have raised red flags, but it didn't. From the Afghan border police and Afghan local police calling and saying they couldn't go on a mission because they didn't have any gas, even though we had delivered fuel to them the day before. To my counterpart, platoon sergeant in the Afghan army-ish, telling me he had a bad feeling. Several other guys telling me that they had a bad feeling. I gave him a quick brief. The PL gave him a quick brief. Something we had never done before. We said a quick prayer, and we loaded up the trucks. I sent up the stats to battalion, or to the company. About 10 minutes after leaving the gate, a report came in of a possible IED. And Nick can attest, I was a gadget guy and I always tried to acquire the best of stuff. I had acquired from EOD a little robot. So when the report came in of the area, I opened up the door of the truck, I threw the robot out, and started driving around looking for stuff. Sent the Afghans forward to check and see. Nothing was in the road. There was nothing there. We didn't find any traces. So we said, hey, we're good. We loaded up the trucks and continued. Now, the last thing I remember is cresting the top of the hill and heading into the valley. John 15, verse 13 tells us, greater love has no than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. So in total, 30 minutes into the mission, our lives would change forever. We struck a large IED, which blew our truck 27 feet into the air, caused the truck to flip upside down and detach. The wheels were in the air. In the process, Nick, who is my brother, my soulmate, one of the toughest men I'll ever meet, his hand was amputated. Nick, being the toughest person he is, did his head-to-toe check, got to his hand and realized something was wrong, and saw his hand sitting there still in the glove, and picked it up and said, I might need this later. Right? The benefit of Nick being here today. And kept it with him. Nick says he heard a scream. I pray every day that scream was from me and not from Tyler. I don't remember anything about any of that, except visions that have come to me throughout the years. No matter what you believe when you die, I can only speak from my experience of what I saw that day. I saw Tyler, my two grandfathers, my uncle, and someone else who looked like a soldier. Everything was white. A calming voice telling me it wasn't my time. And that I was safe to return. I hugged Tyler, hugged my grandparents, and then regained consciousness, something out of a horror movie. I was already in a bag, and I sat up. And Nick can attest, I scared the crap out of everybody. I remember laying there with a tourniquet on my leg, a bone sticking out in my left leg, pretty much ripped off, and trying to fist pump Nick to make sure he was okay. And then passing out again from the pain. 1 Peter 5:8 tells us, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. During this time, or right when we got to Sal, someone came up with the brilliant idea to hand me the sat phone. Because I was somewhat conscious, I should make the notification to my wife myself. And this is where I'm going to let Sarah take over for a minute and talk about what she heard when I called her.
Okay. Well, I'm going to sit, if that's okay. I'm going to hand this. When we first talked about doing this, it was going to be John's story, not mine. I was going to sit here silently and smile at all of you. Hello. And then our dear Pastor Brian thought that I should say something too and sit up here with John. So I started to think to myself, where exactly did I come into this story? Truth is, I've been in it the whole time with John through every deployment, and you might be wondering, what is it like for someone to be married to somebody in the military? Well, I have a word for you, and that word is wait, because that's really all we do. We wait. So I wait to hear if we were moving. I waited to hear if he was leaving. I waited to hear if he was coming home soon, if he was okay, if he was sleeping enough, eating enough, protected, and I waited by my phone, right? I waited with my phone every night right next to my pillow. I took showers with that phone on the counter. I went to the bathroom with that phone on the counter. I never turned it off. I never went it silent. God forbid it ever go dead. I remember calling an AT&T person one time when I didn't have service, and I felt bad for that person because you do not turn that phone off. But in all the times that I helped him pack, kissed him goodbye, and sent him off again, and began my waiting, I never expected that the next call I received would be the one that I did. As John told you, he had called that morning, and he and I joked about the possibility of my being pregnant. And to think of all of those times when he was on leave, we joked just 2 weeks before, wondering how many young couples would be foolish enough to get pregnant during leave. It only happened to the 20-year-olds. It didn't happen to us. The joke is on us. I remember hanging up the phone after he'd called that morning and immediately going into panic mode. I must have taken a dozen pregnancy tests, all of course reading the same thing. Positive, positive, positive. I remember my sister Katie taking me out dancing that night and the relief I felt when my phone rang with the ever so familiar unknown caller on my caller ID. I wanted it to be John so very badly so I could tell him the crazy news, and it was him. But this wasn't a phone call like any of the others I'd ever gotten from him. I remember it being really loud and John's voice sounded really muffled. The sounds of what could have been a helicopter whirring in the background. I could hear that John's voice was shaken, and I immediately had my brother-in-law pull the truck over so I could get out and hear him better. I ran into the middle of what I think was a Walgreens parking lot, but I don't know, and fell to my knees. My heart sank. John said things over the phone like, "Baby, there's so much blood." And I don't know what I'm going to do. We lost Tyler. Nick is hurt, but he's tough. And I can't feel my legs. That's when a voice came on the line and said the words that I'll never forget. Ma'am, we are going to do absolutely everything we can to save your husband. And the line went dead. The next 6 hours were the hardest. I didn't know if John was alive, or if my precious girls still had their father, or even if the little one now growing inside of me would ever know his or her daddy. I put out calls to everyone I knew. I wanted to be there with him wherever he was, hold him, take care of him, and I couldn't. I was forced to wait yet again, and this time I wasn't willing to do it silently. I was put into contact with people, some of whom I'd only met a time or two, men willing to drive all night, calling me back, telling me they'd have eyes on him in just a couple of hours. We had men stationed in Italy, and they drove all night to get to Germany to be by his side. I spent a lot of time on my knees in those first few hours. I begged God to save John, to watch over him, to let me hear his voice, and all I could do was wait. Psalm 27:14 tells us, wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart, and wait for the Lord. There's that wonderful word, wait, wait, wait. Did you know that the word wait appears 106 times in the Bible? 106 times. Not to mention the word waited appears 35 times, and the word waiting appears 8. So truly, waiting was the only thing I could do. I had to wait. I remember falling asleep for just a moment on my sister's couch, and my phone finally rang. This time it was a nurse who was in the Air Force, and she was calling from Germany. She simply said, ma'am, I have a patient here. He's really not supposed to talk because we like to keep him on oxygen as much as we can before we try and transport him to the States. But you see, he's pulling at my heartstrings, ma'am, because although he's supposed to be resting, he keeps pointing at this darn phone next to his bed and telling me over and over again, her name is Sarah. So although it's against policy, and I'm probably going to get in trouble, and it's only going to be for just a moment, here he is. That nurse was my angel that day. I truly believe that. God rewarded me for my waiting, and John was on the line. John came on the line and although very groggy, managed to tell me to kiss the girls, that he loved us, and that he was being medevaced to Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas. Isaiah 40:31 says, but they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. And that's just what happened after that phone call. Without another thought, I was in planning mode. My amazing family stepped up in full force to take care of my girls. And before I knew it, just a few hours later, I was on a flight to Texas. I managed to get there just a few hours before John was scheduled to arrive and was met by hugs in the airport by my adopted sister-in-law, Tammy. We went to lunch with my adopted brother, and they got me settled into my hotel room. Tammy and I spent what seemed to be hours, again, waiting and pacing the floors of that hospital room. My brother Justin went to meet John's plane because he said he didn't trust the other Air Force guys. My brother's in the Air Force, and he said, I'm in the Air Force, but I don't trust those Air Force guys to get him here. And he was going to be the first face that John saw if it couldn't be me. He was also going to be the first one to send me and John's mom a text message letting us know he was in the States. I remember hearing that John had arrived and all of the steps and obstacles I had to get through to get into his room. I had to go into a little room, scrub in, and put on a hospital gown over my clothes and listen to the doctors tell me things like, don't expect much. He's probably going to lose that leg. He'll never walk again. Wheelchairs are your future. And this is all within the first 5 minutes. I did not care about that. I was listening to this all while I could see John through a glass window. At this point, this was the only thing separating he and I from each other. I could see him getting agitated because he could see me too. The hospital staff was trying to switch all of his lines and tags from the Germany lines to the American lines, trying to check his vitals and begin prepping him for the first of many of surgeries that would happen at that hospital in Texas. It didn't matter to John. As we all can see, John's a big, stubborn guy. They called him the bear in the hospital because if the bear was going to get his way, he didn't care how many pain meds he was on, he was going to get his way. He didn't care about any of those little things like vitals, breathing, oxygen. He didn't care. He could see me and I could see him. And before he would let them go any further, he asked for just a moment to be alone with me. And right there, amongst all the pain he was in, the confusion I'm sure he felt, and the uncertain future he knew that was ahead for all of us, He stopped time right then and there to ask me if he was going to be a daddy again. And that is where my heart, I began waiting again. Because that's what I do.
As you heard, Sarah put out a net call to people she had never met. All she had was a black book with phone numbers, emails. Within minutes of her sending out that message, phone calls, sat calls in country, radio messages were put out all over. People started showing up in Bagram. Like Sarah said, brothers drove all night from Italy to Germany. I had brothers get on the plane in D.C. to make sure that I was still on board and that I was safe, and stay on board till the plane started to leave. That's the true meaning of brotherhood. So now my recovery. I woke up in San Antonio about a week and a half later. Everyone telling me I'd been in and out of consciousness. My leg surgery took 12 hours. My first back surgery took 18 hours. My ankle took 4 hours. And since that day, I had 2 surgeries downrange in Afghanistan, another one in Germany. So as of today, I've had 34 surgeries to put me back together. The running joke with my doctor still today is one more time. One more time. I get Facebook messages from my doctors. Hey, how about one more time? We'll go back in for one more time. I now have 26 screws in my body. So if you're looking for entertainment, let's go down to the airport and I'll mess with TSA for a little while. So through this time, my faith has been tested, my strength has been tested, my life has been tested. After multiple days in the ICU being fully awake, again, somebody above me made the brilliant decision to move me to a regular hospital room. I still couldn't sit up past 30 degrees. Every time I turned my head a certain direction, I got sick. If the lights were on in the room, I got sick. If my mother's cell phone rang, I got sick. If a certain station on the TV playing, was it country music? Country music wasn't on. At the time, I didn't like country music. I don't know what was that. But it had to be on, and the room had to be dark. But this was the first time they had moved me to a regular hospital room. They moved me to a room, to a bed, by the door, next to the ice machine, with a roommate that liked to play guitar. This is the day that broke the camel's back. Sarah and my mom were going to shower because they'd been there for 2 weeks at this point. Trust me, they needed to shower. On this particular day, I had gone number 2. The nurses told Sarah and them, we'll clean them up in a couple minutes and we'll take care of it. So about 3 to 4 hours later, Sarah and my mom returned. I still hadn't been cleaned up. I still hadn't got my pain meds. And the nurse that was taking care of me that day really didn't care. Sorry, I had to clean it up. I had some not so nice words in there. So Sarah and my mom finally got me cleaned up, but the problem is my spirit was broken. 2 Chronicles 15:7 says, but you take courage. Do not let your hands be weak, for your work shall be rewarded. I told Sarah and my mom, I just wanted to close my eyes and not wake up. My body was shutting down, so I thought God was answering my prayers. The other nurses put in emergency calls to my doctors. And one by one, the team of doctors that I had showed up. My vitals were crashing. I still couldn't urinate. I have to put this kind of in humor. Next time you go to the store, I want you to pick up 2 cantaloupes and then grab a washcloth. That will examine of why I couldn't go to the bathroom. No joke intended, I promise. My doctor, who we call Eyebrows, said, get him back to ICU and hook him back up to monitors. Revelations 21:4, he will not wipe away every tear from your eyes. He will. And death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore. The former things have passed away. This was the first of many panic attacks that I would have. It took about 24 to 48 hours for me to recover from the events of that day. From that, my attention turned to getting my kids there. This started new tests for my body. My father arrived. My brother Vince was there to watch over me. A good friend of mine was checking on me daily. He was assigned to the Secretary of Defense on his security detail and put on the Secretary of Defense's calendar to come to BAMC to pin Purple Hearts. Now, for those of you who don't know, a Purple Heart is an award that no service member ever wants. I had spent 4.5 tours avoiding that stupid award. Even when I had been hit or blown up or anything, nope, don't need one, I'm good. I was kind of stuck this time and got stuck with one. The day before the SecDev showed up was the first day they put me in the brace. The Army was so convinced that I would never walk again that they spent $10,000 of your taxpayer money on a wheelchair. They got me into the chair. We went outside, 10 minutes, right? 10 minutes to take a picture, and then I got back in bed because I was going to throw up. My head was hurting. The next day, the SecNev came and pinned mine and Nick's Purple Hearts on us. And then spent a couple minutes talking to just Nick and I. At this point, we had met several resistance of getting the kids to us. With one phone call, in 96 hours, the kids were on their way there. It's good to have friends in high places. The kids arrived, and it just happened to be that Sarah was downstairs getting checked for the baby. My recovery started to move forward, and I drew inspiration from Tori. I had watched my mentor, his daughter, suffer through chemotherapy, suffer through the things that she had dealt with her cancer, and continued to move forward and never gave up. No matter how many times she got sick or how many times she had to leave school, no matter what, she just kept pushing. And still to this day, she pushes. So why was I going to be laying in a hospital bed giving up? So I kept pushing and pushing. The decision was made to move me to the VA, to Audie Murphy Polytrauma, to teach me to walk again. Unfortunately, I was only there for 5 days and came back for a checkup. It's never good to hear your doctor say, your scars look angry. Yeah. So later that night, I was back in surgery again. He didn't like the way the hardware looked or how the scar looked, so he cleaned it up. I don't know if it was surgery 10 or 12. I woke up in recovery with a nurse standing there in a biosuit looking at me. Yeah, telling me that I had gotten an infection and I couldn't go back to my room and then I needed to be quarantined. Not a good feeling. The good thing that came out of this, I was moved to the 7th floor of BAMC with no roommate, my own room, which was good. My daughter spent the entire summer on the floor in that hospital room, coloring, playing with Barbies. If the pain was too bad that day, we watched Star Wars, closed all the blinds, and watched movies. They guarded me 24 hours a day. They had a rotation going of what TV shows were on that night, who was staying with Dad. And they fought over what nights they were staying. Madison, on the other hand, chose to sleep in the bed with me to make sure I was safe. Many times the nurses had to come in to help me back into the bed because she had kicked me out of the bed. not good with somebody with a back injury or a leg injury. But through all this, and moving back to polytrauma and learning to walk and deal with things on my own, on 9 October, I was released from the hospital, still in a wheelchair, but walking some. Still having to take shots twice a day and be on high doses of pain medication and other drugs. For the next few months, our life wasn't our own. Proverbs 21:30, there is no wisdom, no insight, no plan that can succeed against the Lord. We learned real quick that it was his plan, not our plan. So the Army called and said, hey, we want you to come back to Alaska for a welcome home ceremony. We've also invited Tyler's parents. The anxiety building up to this was extreme. We had made a date to meet for dinner and sit down and talk. Though to this point, I had only talked to him on the phone. I hadn't actually seen him face to face. And to me, how could I face somebody that, the parents of a child that was lost under my command? And then I failed to bring home. I asked the Lord several times to protect my brothers, and if something was going to happen, that he take me and not them. Unfortunately, as I said earlier, it's not my plan, it's his plan. He had a different plan that day. The meeting was great with the Davis family. Seeing my brothers, talking with his parents was great. But when we returned home to Texas, I started to get back into my own head. Nick was getting ready to retire. The Army made me take up golf, forced me to take up golf. But something was happening that I kept hidden for a long time. On 9 February 2013, our flower that grew amongst the rubble was born. Her name was Tyler Elizabeth Dawn. We named her after Tyler. We named her after Sarah's 2 sisters. She became my PTSD helper. Was still having several days of darkness, still on active duty, with zero clue what was going to happen. One day the Army was starting paperwork to retire me, the next day they were keeping me in. The next day would be something else. So our lives were changing, it wasn't our plan, and we didn't know what we were going to do. So Nick, Sarah, and I made plans to meet at Tyler's grave for the first time, for the anniversary of Tyler's death. The months leading up to this, I turned to narcotics. I was taking my pain pills more and more every day. On an average pill, I was averaging between 1,000 milligrams to 2,000 milligrams. The sad part was I kept this hidden from my wife, my doctor, and everybody else. But because they were prescribed, I never came up hot on a urinalysis. The day came, we picked up Nick from Palm Springs Airport. We met Tyler's parents at the gravesite. It was great. But something had changed inside of me. I didn't know what it was. I'm happy to report that 11 June 2013 was the last time I've taken any pain pills. Even when they've been prescribed to me, I still haven't taken them. I flushed all of them down the toilet, kept one bottle for an extreme emergency. Here's the funny part. I quit cold turkey. With that, we were going to Disneyland for 3 days. It really is the happiest place on earth. After that, being clear of narcotics, the Army retired me in June of 2013. Sometime in 2014, I told Sarah and called Nick and said, hey, I want to do a ride for Tyler, and everything we raise, we'll give to Tyler's family. So I rode out of Vegas that day in June with Nick hanging out Sarah's van with the kids in the car, my bike in the middle, the Hennessy family behind us, my little brother Josh behind us, and rode. And the whole way down towards Yucaipa, I kept praying, please let there be one more person in Victorville. And there were 6. So from Victorville to Yucaipa, I kept saying, please let there be one more person. And there was 20 people when we got to Quaid Harley-Davidson. The next year, we had about 400 to 500 people. Last year, we had a little less. That's because it decided to get hot the day of the ride. But each year, the Lord has blessed us to bring in money to help those going to college and join the military. But still, I hadn't turned to the Lord yet. In 2015, without talking to Sarah or even talking to Nick or talking to the girls, I came up with the wild idea of starting a motorcycle club here in Vegas. With a buddy in California, we started another chapter. And after about a year, we shut that down and patched over to a support club for another club in town. Having no idea what I was thinking, except that now I realize I had made the wrong choice. But with that, I made some great brothers that I'm proud to call my family, who happen to be sitting over here today. Things started to turn around last January, but they were still very, very dark. I was fighting to keep my head above water and didn't know how to let the Lord into my heart or back into my mind. So Sarah finally stepped in and said, "Enough's enough. I'm taking over." Sarah got on the computer and put us in for a fishing trip to Alaska. Yeah. Yeah. So about 5 days before, she shows me this video from Samaritan's Purse called Operation Heal Our Patriots. I fought and fought, flattened the tires in the car. I let the air out. I didn't pop them. But the night before, we got a phone call from Pastor Pat, who happens to be watching live on Facebook right now. Tell us how excited they were for us and that to relax and they would help us find ourselves again. I hadn't been back to Alaska since the welcome home ceremony with the Davises and didn't know what to expect. But we landed in Anchorage, got on a bus, went to a private terminal where there was 2 little planes sitting there with 10 other couples, all having the same deer in headlights look on their faces. The guys all had the look of, my wife lied to me and tricked me. This ain't no fishing trip. We got on these planes and headed out to Lake Clark, Port Allsworth, which is about an hour and a half west of Anchorage. And they told us beforehand we weren't going to have cell phones. So basically, I had an $800 camera that was supposed to make phone calls. No Facebook, no communications of any kind. Just the kids had an emergency number. If something happened, they needed to get a hold of us. And I'll tell you, when you look out the window, all you see is green and green and green and green, and then some mountains, and then this beautiful lake. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of nowhere, you see 2 gravel runways. And you're like, where are we at? Yes, gravel runways. And the planes bank, and you land, and you hear cheering and whatnot, and you're like, what is that? And Sarah and I happened to be sitting in the front of the plane, so we were the last ones to get off the plane. And there's 200 people standing on the runway from Port Allsworth. And the first person you see is Franklin Graham standing there with his wife. And you walk down the line, and they shake your hands, and they welcome you. And they give you a cabin mom who gives you the breakdown of how things are going to go. And she told us that day, hey, dinner's in, what was it, an hour? I think I put an hour. An hour. So unpack. You know you're married to a military wife when it takes her less than 10 minutes to unpack your suitcase and hers. So they gave us our plan for the week. Breakfast every morning at 7 a.m., devotion at 8 a.m., 8:30 class, 10 o'clock adventure, which was usually fishing, hiking, boating, fly fishing, bear watching. Yeah. Those adventures all ended at 4 o'clock, and you were back in the classroom from 4 to 5 for dinner. When dinner was done, you had class from 6 to 10. But here's the kicker. The sun's out the entire time. So you really don't know what time it is. All you know is by the 3rd day, you're exhausted, and you have no idea what's going on. But there was another one that I'm proud to call my brother there by the name of Tim. We became known as the bearded guys because we both had long beards. And everybody sitting in that room all said the same thing. Their wives tricked them and lied to them. But on the 3rd day, I had a pushy chaplain by the name of Chaplain Steve. tell me that he wanted to have one-on-one counseling with me. Where I come from, when somebody says they want to have one-on-one counseling with you, it's never a good thing. So after milkshakes that night, they give you milkshakes at night too, which was kind of cool. Yeah. We met them, went and sat down. After about 10 minutes, he kicked Sarah and his wife away and talked to us. About 3 hours into our talk, it finally hit me. All the wrong decisions I had made, all the stuff that was going through my head, I needed to just suck it up and let the Lord back into my life, which is what I did. From that moment forward, I felt a calmness over me. I knew the Lord was with me both in my head and in my heart. While we were there, we re-blessed our marriage and continued to push forward and learn. On the last night, they have you write down something you want to leave in Alaska, the biggest obstacle you have that holds you back. So Sarah wrote down hers, and I wrote down mine. And Sarah didn't know what I had written down till the other night when she read through my notes. I wrote down, kick my demons. You put it on a log and you throw it into this fire and it burns up. 2 Chronicles 13-5. Examine yourself to see whether you are in the faith. Test yourself, or do not realize this about yourself, that Jesus Christ is in you, unless indeed you fail to meet the test. So here's an example of him testing me still today. A couple weeks ago, Mackenzie was being baptized. Unfortunately, I was away on business. So our plan was we were going to FaceTime it. And everything was going good. The doors closed to the aircraft and we started to push away, and all of a sudden we started to have technical difficulties. $800 Apple phone didn't work for nothing. But I started to get mad. I started to get upset. And all of a sudden, that same voice that I felt in Alaska came over to me to calm and be relaxed. And I did. I watched a movie on the plane. When I landed in Salt Lake City, my phone exploded with text messages and videos and pictures of everything that had happened. So I got to see the moment, not live, but I got to see the moment and realized it was in his plan. There was obviously a reason why he wanted me to get there and see it on video. So currently, Sarah, Nick, Tyler's family, and I run the Nathan Tyler Davis Foundation full-time. With that, Sarah and I both teach youth group here. And my brothers will tell you that every chance I get, even when they're pulled over on the side of the road getting a speeding ticket, I try to witness to them. I found a piece of my life that I want to share with everyone. And Sarah and I have come up with a plan that if we can help one kid, then we've met our goal. So in closing, have things changed over the last 5 years? Yeah, 100%. Good? Yes. Bad? Absolutely. But are they still changing? Yeah. Are we living for the Lord now? Absolutely. It's all in his hands. Psalms 23:4. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Thank you all for listening to our testimony today.
Eternal God, unchanging, mysterious.